Welcome to the kingdom. I'm Chris, and this is Good Enough Gaming. Alrighty, well, howdy, folks. Welcome, everybody, to the Line of Sight podcast, where we take a look at gaming from a bunch of different perspectives. And today I have two guests with me who don't need that much of an introduction. They both come from one of the biggest tabletop wargaming channels on the internet, from Miniwargaming. We have Skari and Luka with us today to talk about all kinds of different things. We'll talk about one-page rules. We'll talk about tabletop gaming in general. But to both of you, thank you very much for taking time out of your guys' busy schedule and joining me on the podcast.
No problem. Thanks for inviting us. Actually, yeah. You got the right guy here. I'll talk until you tell me to stop talking, and I'll try my best to be polite and let other people get a word in.
Luka, my turn to say hi now. Thank you very much. Hello, everyone.
There you go.
I'm going to have to make
this is going to be fun.
That I give everyone equal time to speak here. So I'll start off the way I start off every single one of my podcasts so that folks can get to know you a little bit. But tell me, how did you get into tabletop wargaming? So I guess we'll go alphabetically. So we'll start with Luka and then we'll move on to Skari. So how'd you get into this hobby?
As a kid, I was 7 or 8, and my best friends, me and another kid, were babysat by this one woman at the same time, and we became really close. And his father was really into it back in the early 90s, like mid 90s. So we're talking like second edition 40K, start of third edition 40K.
Okay, I was going to ask when you say was into it, like gaming in general, or specifically 40K. So that was your first foray, was Warhammer.
I actually, that's a good question. I don't know what else he was into. Those are the models he had, though. I never even thought about that, if he was in other games or anything at the time. I'm sure he was.
Oh, yeah. I mean, as everybody knows, you start in one of these tabletop wargamings, and before long, you're in half a dozen of them.
Yep. I kind of really fell in love with them.
Very true.
That was essentially he was trying to explain the rules. We were 8. Obviously, it wasn't going to stick. We kind of came up with our own rules, and he was content that we were content. And that's essentially it. He just kind of let us have fun with it, and he gave us his his not well painted models.
Get rid of the old stuff.
Yeah, and I remember the moment I fell in love with it is when he pulled out the stupid little blast template for throwing grenades. That was it. I'm like, oh, I'm in. I can mind unlocked. This is my life now.
And then he got out the larger template, and then you just completely lost it.
Essentially, yeah. As more and more things were revealed, I really appreciated what they were doing, what the game was at the time.
Awesome. Speaking of that small template, my brother and I used to think that multi Meltas in third edition shot that small template.
Why?
Because it was heavy. So for some reason, we just thought that heavy weapons shot that template. Anyway, that's just a random story.
Well, was that how you got into it, you and your brother, or?
I got into it when I was about 12. I'm 37 now. And I've played since I was 12 with no breaks. Mainly 40K, but recently been branching into a lot of stuff. I went to England and came back with a third edition box set, and my life was never the same.
That's a damn good box set, man.
It is a great box set. And
life was never the same.
Play Dark Eldar and Black Templars. That's just my.
Do you win even one of those games
with the Dark Eldar? Heck no.
Yeah. No, it's so
bad. We would split the box, Dark Eldar and Black Templars, and we quickly found out that the Dark Eldar were clearly outmatched. So we ended up splitting the Space Marines into 2 sections. So we'd be like, you get 5 Space Marines, I get 5 Space Marines. Then we kind of roll off to see who got the Sergeant and who got the special weapon and who got the heavy weapon. And then the Terminator squad was 5 because I had a Terminator squad. So we ended up splitting that unit as well. And we'd each get 2 Terminators, and then we'd fight over who got the Landspeeder. And that was like, and then we just played the mirror match because the Dark Eldar were terrible.
But obviously there was something about him, like, because I mean your avatar here for Discord, it's Dark Eldar. That's your one true love, so to speak.
Yes, yeah, that was more coming into future editions of Warhammer, and it comes to what it's sort of like a direct avatar of what motivates me in the game, or in games in general, which is people said it couldn't be done. And
Ah.
so when I started playing Dark Eldar, everybody said they were terrible and nobody could win with them. And I was like, I'll show all of you. Just that's how I guess spite is a great motivator sometimes.
Well, I mean, if it works, why not go with it?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So then, like recently, MiniWargaming has kind of jumped in with both feet. In I don't know if it's a official partnership or collaboration, however you want to call it, with One Page Rules. Are you able to say how did that come about? Because One Page Rules has been around for a long time, and just suddenly, bam, like it's there.
I think, as far as I know, Matthew, one of the owners of MiniWargaming, Dave being the other, was reaching out to other companies to see if they wanted to, collaborate, or if they wanted their content on the channel, if they wanted to show off anything in particular to a wider audience. And then One Page Rules just like, oh, absolutely, like let's do it, let's make this happen. Was one of the companies that said that. Infinity being another company, or Corpus Belli.
Corpus Belli, yeah, familiar. Yeah. Haven't played as much Infinity as a lot of the people who watch my channel say I definitely have to try it. So it's on the to-do list. But
Luke and I have had a lot of fun learning Infinity. And now that N5 is around the corner, we're really excited about N5.
Yeah, they just came out with their newest edition. Well, I don't know if it's not released yet, but it is. Yeah, it's like Skari said, it's around the corner.
Okay. So then, now that, I mean, MiniWargaming, you guys are filming battle reports, playing. How much One Page Rules have each of you actually played? Like number of games or hours or what have you?
Not a whole lot. Probably
3 for me.
Yeah, I'm no more than 4 myself.
4.
Okay. 3 or 4. Yeah, and I think we have 4 or 5 factions, 6 factions.
Yep. Like we only really just started getting into it, like you said, like 3 months ago, 4 months ago, maybe.
What's the company that makes and designs the models for One Page Rules?
Titan
Forge.
No. Titan Forge prints them, but One Page Rules they do the STL design.
It's agnostic, or they do the STLs. No, I know Titan Forge.
That's what it was. Yeah.
The MiniWargaming Forge has like a lot of prints for One Page Rules now as well.
Right. They make their own STLs.
Right. You can order like the actual armies from the MiniWargaming Forge, and the models look awesome. I think you played with. I played personally with like the Space Lizards.
I'm Robot Legions.
Robot Legion. I also played 2 games of Robot Legions recently. Yeah, just kind of trying to show off and tell Luka, hey, look what I can do, buddy.
They give off like a. I don't know. I don't know what edition of Necrons. This is a collection we have. It kind of makes me feel like 5th edition Necrons with like that Triarch Praetorian, that Stalker. Yeah.
The feel is very like. Of course, there's an overlap if you're playing One Page Rules with the Grim Dark Future, right? Because they have like very specific like rules. You have Grim Dark Future, and you've got fantasy battles.
What? Yeah, Age of Fantasy.
It's Age of Fantasy.
Fantasy, and then you have the other one, right?
You have got. 3. They actually have a total of 8.
Yeah, they got a lot of games.
Cool.
And so, I mean, I don't know how much you all are familiar with the whole background of it, but One Page Rules started, as I call it, like a rage quit of 40K.
It was 6. It was a 6th edition. Must have been 6.
Yeah, it was about 10 years ago then.
Yeah, it was 6th edition. I swear, everybody left at 6th edition. Everybody didn't care anymore.
And so they took every game, not just Warhammer, but they took a bunch of the GW ideas, the game systems, and made an equivalent to try and trim it down, make it simpler. So you have Grimdark Future for 40K, Age of Fantasy for Sigmar, and then you have Age of Fantasy Regiments, which is their match of
Regiments,
of fantasy. But they've got skirmish versions of each one. They have Warfleets, which is like their Battlefleet Gothic version, and then they've just released 2. They're called Quest and Star Quest, and I describe it like playing Diablo on a tabletop. Like you have your single model characters, and you fight waves and waves and waves of monsters or enemies as you work through objectives and stuff like that. It's a really
also
great
have a Blood Bowl one, right?
Yes. Now they haven't officially re-released that one, but Death Ball. And another gentleman that I interviewed, he has a One Page Rules YouTube channel. He took the Death Ball rules and adjusted them a bit to kind of bring them in line with modern Blood Bowl. And actually, I put up a video yesterday playing it. It's a lot of fun. It's very fast. It's not nearly as complex as Blood Bowl. I don't know if either of you are big fans of Blood Bowl, but
Blood Bowl is probably my single most experienced game I played. I got to have like over 1,000 games, like 1,500 games of Blood Bowl in me.
Well, then I would be very curious your take on it, because there's a lot that's been trimmed. Like there's one of the things I was going to ask you is, after playing your first game of it, both of you have obviously played lots and lots of 40K. After your first game of one-page rules, what were your reactions? What did you think of it as a game?
I think
that was my reaction. My reaction was, "Oh, that was simple. That was easy. That was like
I remember.
It was like a nice light snack."
They did it. They actually fit it on a. They fit it on a page. Those SOVs, man. They figured it out, and they even had like I remember we had the printout. Maybe our font was a little bit smaller, but there's still a little spot in the bottom right corner where they could have fit more stuff. I'm like, yeah, they got room for extra rules here.
Yeah,
it was pretty. It was pretty. The core. It's just the core rule. Yeah.
Just the core rules.
It felt liberating in a way because it wasn't overly taxing.
Yep. It was easy to set up. It was nice.
Easy to set up, easy to follow the rules, simple to play.
List. Yeah.
The lists were not complicated. The app website is fantastic. Just to kind of build your stuff like that. All the rules at your fingertips are really good. And as content creators, being able to
it makes your life easier, that's for sure.
It made our lives super. Like we love one-page rules film days because you can crank out like 2 to 3 games in a day.
Yeah, I was going to say
have time left over to clean up after. It's like other than a 40K game, which literally
it's like all day,
all 8 hours of your day.
Sigmar as well.
To get done. Anyway, yeah.
Well, no, because that's exactly what I'm curious about. Is one of the, I don't know if you call it debates, but one-page rules seems to walk this fine line. How do you make the game simpler without becoming too simplistic and kind of losing what makes a war game really unique? So, how do you think it avoided just becoming way too simple? What you say it was simple, but it didn't bore you, obviously.
No, I think there were a couple of things that really drew me from I like tactical gameplay perspective. And that was, I really like the you-go-I-go system. Once you get to know that you can use it as a tactical thing, where you're like, especially when you're using things in the rules, which were like ambushers or whatever, where you can kind of like, basically old school deep strike, you like pop them up somewhere or whatever. But depending on who gets the first activation, you can kind of use it as a tactical thing where you're like, well, you can activate yours first, but I put mine in a position to like really hurt yours as well, and it's like, it's this back and forth of finding out and I really enjoyed that. Like trying to figure out what the most optimal number of activations to have in a list and how to use each activation to force activations to then, get the best results out of my activation. So that alone has kept me entertained. Like not even like, the dice rolling is great. It's like so many dice, roll, take saves, whatever, take your shaken saves or whatnot. Like that's very simple and straightforward. But when it comes down to it, it's like it's harder to learn the nuances and the implications of those choices, which is what I enjoy in a game.
Yeah, okay. Like you could have never played Grimdark Future before, and you could be given an army from, as long as you know like wargaming, you could play an army, pick it up, play, feel like you're making the right decisions, feel rewarded, and then the game's done. You had a good time. But if you're an experienced player, then it offers like all those decisions matter a little bit more, and you understand the game a lot more, and it's still rewarding as an experienced player. It's just you can go in, not feel overwhelmed as a new player, have a good time, get out, and then you can just kind of grow with the game.
So it can stretch based on where you're at. If you're brand new, you can play it and enjoy it. But even if you're seasoned, you can play it and enjoy it.
And that's just right out of the core rules. Like you can take the same army as like an inexperienced player, play well enough with someone else who's inexperienced, have a great time, and then take that exact same army and just roll face with it if you wanted to, against someone who's inexperienced, I suppose. But have a pretty good game at a high level as well with that same army.
Right.
Like there are the
Mm.
more like competitive-y rules, like
Yep.
different scenarios that they add, and the expanded sort of like FAQ and sort of like rule set that is more than one page, which we have not gone into yet.
Now
Right.
I imagine.
You know,
Sorry. I assumed that I looked at a few of those, and a lot of those really seemed to just kind of nip in the butt, like people who are trying to stretch the rule a little too far. When they're trying to ask too many questions on how something simplistically resolves, just to get some benefit out of it. That's just to kind of cement in, like, no, this is the intent of this. This is how this works. These are the parameters of how you could use this.
And that was kind of the impetus behind it, was that because games like 40K were way more complex, there was a lot more wiggle room how to interpret this rule or that. And so to clarify, the rule books got bigger and bigger and bigger. And that's why the creators said, no, can we just boil this back down to just one page of simple rules? But at the same time, you're absolutely right. They just released the update. They're going to do a yearly update to the game. And if you get the advanced rules, there's a good, it seems to me, like 50 pages or so of additional things you can add in. And a lot of them are things from 40K that got ported over or adapted in a way.
Yeah.
And so now there's a bit of I wouldn't say a concern, but some players are going, well, don't copy them too much. Like, make your own game. The game has already got its foundation in 40K, but if you're constantly chasing after them, then it's no longer your game.
I see.
like there is value
that.
in there's value in sort of like using a concept that works.
Yes.
Whatever the game it is, from whatever game it is. Like, if you like a concept and goes, well, I like how that works, right? Then adapt it to your game. At the end of the day, though, I think Luke and I will be going through a lot of these like expanded advanced rules.
Oh yeah.
And then we'll have a much better sort of like understanding or judgment of what it feels like to play them, and what the implications of them are over time. But right now, even being super seasoned, veteran, professional wargamers, just the basic rules have been a breath of fresh air and have provided us with a fun and entertaining couple of hours between us, even while filming content for everybody like the watches. It's not only fun for them to watch, but it's been fun for us to set up and play. I think that alone just shows to the testament of how robust a single page of rules can be, right? Mm-hmm. Which is, and how simplicity doesn't necessarily mean mind numbing, right?
No, absolutely. Yeah.
I wonder, like, with the advanced rules, is it kind of you kind of pick and choose what you want to play with you and your group?
Yes.
From amongst them. Yeah, that's the idea.
Yep.
Okay.
So, for example, I've been playing it a little bit more intensive for probably about a year or two. I played 40K since I was in high school, I think, so a lot longer. But for example, after playing for 2 years of one-page rules, one of the things I didn't like was there was no, for example, vehicle degrading. Big monsters and vehicles are good to the last drop, and in the recent update, they have brought in vehicle degrading as an extra rule if you want it. So if you don't, you play as normal. But if you do, they say this is how it will work. And does
that come into the balance of the vehicles? Because then now they have a downside to them. How does that affect like their points and their effect on the battlefield? Or is that just kind of taken with consideration? Like, the vehicles are technically going to be a little bit weaker.
Yeah, I don't think they've changed the points. At least the rule release. Yeah, the rule release was only a month or so ago. I think it was in September. And so they'll gather feedback from players throughout the next couple months or year, and then they'll make adjustments to points and stuff based on that. But and a lot of my viewers disagreed with me on this. I always thought vehicles were way overpowered because they didn't degrade, and so just by adding that feature, suddenly now the points are worth it.
Oh, I see. Okay.
But others would say not so. So it's like a buffet. You have 50 pages of rules, and then you can be like, well, if I just want to do the core one page, you can. And I find that was great for introducing brand new players. There's actually some folks at my local gaming store who want to get into it, and we just play the basic rules. And then as they get comfortable, you add more and you add more. And so you can make it as complex as you want.
I suspect that's what we'll end up doing very shortly.
Well,
That was the natural
we'll end up.
progression.
I like that like house ruling style where you can be like, oh, let's play with this or that, or kind of like create your own
That's
flavor.
old school Games Workshop writing back in like 5th and 2nd edition, like Warhammer Fantasy Battles. They always have like little clauses in there. Like, here's extra rules you could use if you want to. You don't have to.
Yep.
You know.
Yep. So that's fantastic for casual gaming. You do run into the difficulty though if you want to like have competitive or tournament. You have to establish which of those advanced special rules are going to be in there.
It's the same in every game system.
Yeah,
if you go to a tournament, there'll be a player pack that says, we answer this question this way. This is a rule that's in place for this event. And it doesn't matter whether you're playing 40K, Age of Sigmar, Fantasy. It literally doesn't matter. Like everything, and each event will have its own sort of like ruling, or each series of people who run events will have ways to rule special things. They'll have terrain packs that are completely different. So that is no different than anything.
I haven't done much tournament because I really suck at the gaming side of the hobby. I love the building, I love the painting, I love playing, but I am not.
Bring back best overall, best painted. Let's go.
You're not going to find a game out there that is played the same unanimously across like wherever it's being played. I guess like with the world or whatever continent. Yeah, they're always different. Like just different interpretations of the rules. They have access to different terrain, like Skari said. It's just. They make it work, right? So you can play from one shop to the other, but you might be playing a different game technically.
Yeah. The caveat I always tell people when they're preparing to go to a tournament is, if they have a question about a rule, just ask the TO. And a lot of the times the TO will say, read the player pack, and you go, okay, and then you read the player pack, and the question is there. But if you have a rule question and you want to go to an event, just ask the TO, and you will go to the event knowing the answer to that question. It just makes your life way simpler.
So then good advice for anyone who wants to organize tournaments. In fact, OPR had its first official tournament earlier. I think Dave went to it. And,
nice.
The first one, it was at the UK Games Expo. And I interviewed the two guys who helped put it on and one of the other contestants, and just asked them, and they said, yeah, we learned a lot of lessons about how to put on the tournament. So it's nothing I've ever done. I'd be interested, but that's good to know. The player.
Skari's got a lot of experience with running events and being around events all the time. You know, I mean, I'm sure there was like a period of time there where you were like at one, like if not every weekend, like at least 1 or 2 a month.
Still is.
Yeah.
Well, then I'm definitely going to have to chat with you. Well, definitely going to have to chat with you again if you ever run or help participate in a one-page rules tournament.
Yeah, that'd be really fun. You know, it's definitely a community that, you know, it's only really opened up since we started doing, like for me personally, because, you know, being that I have a personal channel where I play Warhammer 40K, I'm a professional, like competitive gaming coach. And I do focus mainly on 40K, but it has to do with a lot of different things. A lot of my time and focus is on that, and being able to work at Miniwargaming with Miniwargaming and do a lot of different content has really helped me engage with a lot of different communities, whether it's the Infinity community or the Corvus Belli community or the One Page Rule community. And it's one of those things that I'm definitely open to. I love competition. I love competing and like meeting people and shaking hands and like learning and just immersing myself in the culture of a game. And if I get to go to one, that would be really fun.
So you've each said you've played maybe less than a half a dozen games. Were they all Grimdark Future, or have you guys dabbled in fantasy or any of that other stuff?
I've only played Grimdark Future. I assume the rules are very similar in the age.
They're identical.
Yeah. So
they're literally identical.
Same.
Yeah, I figured.
Same, only Grimdark Future. However, I guess the devil's in the details, right? Where it'd be more about the combos and army rules and things and in combinations, right?
Well, I guess I wonder if the army rules are different.
But many of the general rules just have a different name, but you read the description, it's the exact same same thing.
Like exploding sixes and stuff like that.
Yeah. In fact, just to prove that it's possible, is I actually I played a game where I played a Grimdark Future army and a friend of mine played a fantasy army, and it worked. Although you did have to keep in mind that the fantasy had a lot less ranged attacks.
Oh, yeah.
It's more of a melee game. And so if you bring a shooting heavy army and they bring a melee heavy army, it's going to be a very, very one-sided competition. But it works. You could cross-pollinate, and it was actually kind of fun doing that.
Thousands of years in the grimdark future, lizards with lasers come and fight lizards with spears and blow darts.
Exactly. Exactly. I mean, who wouldn't want to see that?
That's right.
It's like the old Elder Exodites versus like Space Marine chapters.
Exactly, yeah.
You're only bounded by your imagination.
Yeah.
So then, no, go ahead. Sorry, I did.
No, go ahead. I had no idea where I was going with that one. It was just more anecdotal nonsense.
So then, is the plan with the bat reps on Miniwargaming to branch out to try those others, or is it mostly going to be Grimdark Future, or can you not tell me because it's a trade secret and you have to kill me?
Maybe I don't know if there's if it's like a trade secret or anything like that. I think the idea is that they are trying to promote whatever they're trying to promote is what we're probably going to be playing.
Okay.
Yeah. So if they have like a new model they're trying to show off, or a few new models, a few STLs, maybe an update to something, they usually talk to Matthew, and then we're like, okay, well, let's go show this off, or let's go do this.
Oh, okay.
So our games are
as far as I've heard, I believe that there is probably a plan to do some of the Age of Fantasy as well. So I think and maybe probably regiments at some point. It is a fluid situation. So we get to know what's on the schedule the week of, and we just get excited about doing it when it's on our schedule.
Okay. Well, that makes sense. Well, OPR just announced they're going to start releasing faction books, which aren't quite the same as codexes, because I don't think they're going to contain rules. And if they do contain any rules, those rules go on the Army Forge anyways. But it's more like lore. And
lore is important.
Paint schemes and stuff. So and the first one they're releasing is in Age of Fantasy.
Okay.
So
nice.
So I imagine that will be coming down the pike here.
That's cool.
So then one thing I got to ask, since you guys you play all of these different games, different gaming systems.
You name it, we play it.
How do you keep the rules straight?
It's like, some people would say we don't, but it's it's difficult. It's impossible. Even simple games that like Grimdark Future or Age of Fantasy, you can still blunder a rule here and there, and you're still going to forget something, no matter how experienced you are. It's almost impossible to play like a perfect game. You might mismeasure something. You might forget that you added an extra inch on something for some reason. It's just I don't know. You get used to just kind of absorbing rules the more you play the games, because then you look at a rule set and then you immediately dissect it into like different categories of where those rules are from, because it's hard to come up with original ideas. So you kind of just they took this piece set from there, this is from there, that's from there.
Compartmentalize it, and it's like a rule will be very similar regardless of where you hear the rule. It'll be very similar in nature, and the more games you play, when you hear something go, oh, you need this to happen, it's like, oh, it's one of those rules.
Yeah,
right? Exactly. And so it's very easier to sort of like compartmentalize. On the flip side, and something else to remember is we're not normal humans.
we this is our job though, too. So we spend the other thing to remember is like anyone who's like listening, don't forget that like you have your job, you spend all day doing that, you are good at doing your job. So you just it's just what you do, right? Anyone can get good at doing whatever they do all the time.
Yeah, so like if you're good at like data input and you're an Excel like wizard or whatever, and you do a bunch of stuff for work, like it's very similar for us. We've literally been working with miniature war games for decades, right? And our brains are just wired to soak in rules and spew out rules, and we just get good at it. Another thing that really helps is we use copious amounts of tokens and things that help us remember game rules as we're playing. And we also value game resources, like apps and things that like tell us the rules and things. So while we're playing, we can quickly reference the rules. We definitely call it man reads book or person reads book.
Man reads phone,
when we're trying to learn something, man reads phone, or where we're literally just constantly referencing a rule or the order of operations on things. And so the first couple of times we play any game system, it tends to be a little bit of like processing information. So it can be a little rougher, but the more we play it, of course, the quicker we know where to find those rules and go for it. And sometimes we'll be scheduled to play one game, and then we have to play another game when we set foot into the office that day. So all the prep work that we've done doesn't work, and we have to like prep and get ready and build lists and learn rules within like an hour of getting into the office.
Some of the more impressive. Oh, so I was going to say, sorry, one of the more impressive things that me and Skari had to do is learn Infinity in like 20 minutes, and then play Infinity.
That's kind of complicated.
And like on camera in front of thousands, like, all right, you guys, and like they're paying for like a sponsored good content. It's just like we have no idea what this. Infinity is a very complicated game.
Yes,
actually, it's been great because we've been able to play with very similar like armies or factions, and we've been having a great jump in from the community that has been awesome at being like, hey, we know it's complicated, here's some things that help you. And so like every game after that, people go, oh, don't forget this or don't forget this, like in comments and things like that. Yeah. And it makes it a lot easier to sort of like generate better content when people are actively involved to providing productive criticism or like bouncing ideas off of us, so that we can go, oh, cool. And then we can apply that to our next games as well. Because, people who have played games like the ones that we're showing off, like One Page Rules or Infinity, for a long time will have tips and tricks that Luke and I know from 40K, because that's the game we play all the time. But we haven't learned those like nuances in other games, for example.
Another thing that helps is when it comes to like designing games, designers have like, I don't know how to word it. They're designing something that's supposed to be fun with logic dictating the rules. So when you're playing a game and you don't really know what the rule's trying to convey, or you're lost in reading it, usually logic will dictate what the right answer is. So if we're kind of just winging it and we don't know how something works, we kind of go with our gut, and like that's usually typically the right call. And the pace of play keeps going. People who are just watching or listening might not clue in that we did it maybe a very, very minorly incorrectly, semantics and stuff like that typically. But usually all designers have the same kind of goal in mind: logical, fun, either very crunchy or simple rules. It's like my favorite example is like there's a lot of animosity, or there was a lot of animosity between Sigmar players and old school Warhammer Fantasy Battle players, saying Sigmar's too simple of a game. They stripped away all the flavor from fantasy. And then I'm going off on a tangent here, but it's like a chariot in fantasy. You'd have to jump through a couple hoops, look at a couple rules on how impact hits work. And then in Sigmar, they simply do damage on a 3, like you roll a D3, and that's how much damage they do. Right. Unless you roll a 1. But in the end, it's the same dang result. That Warhammer Fantasy chariot charged into a unit of dudes, killed 3 guys. That Sigmar chariot charged into a group of dudes, killed 3 guys with like this, like a similar, with so many less steps. But it's just, I don't even know where I was going with that. Anyways, it's just, it all comes down to it's a lot easier when you play all these different games, because you can kind of see what the designers are trying to do with the rules. And then you can even you could read just the first little bit of, now granted, we read everything, but like as you're reading the rules, you start to immediately understand what they're trying to convey with that rule set.
Well, actually then, along with that, since at the same time you've got your tried and true, you guys have been playing 40K forever, you just dip your toe in One Page Rules, but Miniwargaming is also developing Ravaged Star. Now, you guys have had input in the rule set for that?
Oh, yes.
So,
yep.
Yeah. So then you're speaking, when you're talking about game developers and making rules, you're a part of that. So when you're making these suggestions for rules, how do you determine, even if this is just personal taste, when you say, I really think the game should have this rule, or as you say, this one, it's fluffy, but it's going to harm the game. Like, how are you informing when you make suggestions on what makes a game good?
Well, for Ravaged Star, the process was we provided feedback, but not necessarily direct rules. Like, it was a lot of brainstorming. Okay. So Matthew kind of went through and was like, these are kind of like what I see as rules for the main factions. Early on, it was like the 4 main factions or 3 main factions. And And then we got to play test a lot.
A lot of playtesting. A lot of
Yeah,
playtesting.
at least from my end, it was like I'd make a list, and then I'd go, "This unit is too good." I'd be like, "I cannot see myself making a list that does not have this unit in it."
Yep.
You know, that would be from my perspective, like that feedback being like, if like there's nothing in this army that does what this unit does for the cost or whatever. Like it just does everything.
I know exactly
like,
what you're talking about too.
I
I can't remember their name because I think their name change was the Gorkog, like gun guy.
Yeah, they're the Hydralisk style ones or whatever.
Yeah,
anyway.
they're things were nasty.
Yeah, flesh terror. No, not flesh terror. Anyway, whatever it is.
Yeah.
So it was like a unit, and every time I'd run them over months, I'd run 2 squads, and I'd be like, these guys just do everything. They shoot, they fight, they just do everything.
They're fast.
And so eventually, they were just too good. So over time, you know, they kind of got balanced. And the same with things like the actual main Ravage Star, the Veil Touched, right? Like we had a lot of conversations, or Matthew at least, like with all of us, on how to make the elite army feel elite without like punishing them too much for taking casualties, because then the eliteness would kind of like instantly disappear. But also, you know, making sure that like a full unit of them wasn't so OP that it was like crazy or like overpowered, right? And so finding that fine line between, you know, making them feel like that each model is worth 2 models, right? Without having to have 2 models on the table for each model, and without having 2 models kill 10 models, you know, that sort of thing. So
how many games did you have to play before you could start to see those kinds of patterns?
Well, I played what, 10 games of Ravage Star, 10 to 12 games. Yeah, I think. I don't know about you, Luka.
I probably played around 30.
Yeah, the playtesting community that they've built for Ravage Star is,
oh my gosh,
thousands of games.
Yeah. And I did a couple. Myself.
Thousands and thousands.
Yep.
Their Discord is always popping off about like with data, and so the data they get and the changes that Matthew has made to the game or implemented have come from thousands of games being played, and all of the aggregate feedback of those players. And not everything makes it, of course. Not everything sort of fits the style, and of course, there's biases that you have to sort of like navigate as well, right? But it's feedback that's taken from actual people playing actual games.
I'll be very curious then to, once you guys start to play more Grimdark Future, to see if that same thing happens. Because when you were mentioning, Skari, that every time you build a list, if you always put this one unit in, and it's not like a core unit or something that you should expect to see lots of, that might be an indication that maybe the unit's a little too good. Whereas at the same time, there might be another unit you never take ever, because this other one can do the same thing, and it also, you know, does your taxes.
Or mechanically, you know, mechanically it's different or whatever. And at the same time, as a player, as a person who gets to test things, it's hard to step away from the tried and true. But a lot of the times we have to sort of force ourselves to run meme lists, right? Just to see what it feels like to do something completely wacky and crazy. And it also kind of gives you those parameters, right? Like from one end to the other of like a spectrum of like very efficient to just wacky, right?
Yeah.
And if you can do anything and everything in between, it gives you a lot more perspective on the units that you've picked over the long run. But it's hard to do unless you give yourself that perspective.
Because, I mean, it's a war game. You're playing because you'd like to win, especially if you're in a more competitive match. And then, especially with games like 40K, where again, it's a commitment. Like you book an entire evening. The last thing you want to do is try something new and fancy with your army and get tabled in turn 2, and all that effort's kind of shot down the tubes. Yeah. So it's interesting. How do you? This is more than me just asking myself. How you get yourself to try something new. And I suppose that's where one-page rules would have a bit of an advantage, because as you guys said, the games go by a lot faster. You said you could play 2 or 3 in the same time that it takes you to play 1. Now, what size point games are you normally going to be running? Are you doing 2,000 points, 1,500?
We did 2,000 points was the point value that we were playing at.
Okay.
So 2,000 points. We ended up playing a few games at 2,000 points, and that was sort of like the main size. But the main thing that we found is that we were playing, and Luka can attest to this. Is we were playing 2,000 points, but the number of models that we're playing, if you're relating it to a 40K game right now, 2,000 points, what felt like 1,500 to 1,250 points of
Yes.
40K.
Yeah. It does scale quite different. Sorry, Luca, go ahead. What were you saying?
I agree. I just thought my internet data just came back. I don't know if you
It
asked me any
happens.
questions or not.
Well, actually, we actually discovered the secret of life, and you missed it.
Oh, okay. Well,
But I forgot to write it down, so now I can't go back. Maybe after I edit, I'll let you know.
We'll get to there
Okay.
eventually.
We'll get back there.
30, 31, 32. We'll
That's
get
true.
there.
We'll get.
34.
We're so close. We're so
We're
close.
so close.
But no, I noticed the same thing. I've started playing, and I've had this recommendation from others who play a lot more than I do, that they play up to 4,000 or 5,000 points, and they say that feels, at least in terms of time commitment and scale, that feels more like what people who play 40K are more used to. Longer games, several hours.
Oof.
But you've got like 3 times as many models on the table. Like it feels like almost like an apocalypse game in terms of number of minis, but the game itself will only take 2 to 3 hours. So stuff dies really fast. But then that feels a little bit more, I don't know. It always seemed weird to me when I play 40K and you, after rolling dice after dice after dice, you've killed one Terminator. And then you're just thinking, oh my gosh, I'm never going to get anywhere on this.
That's fair. I'm always a more defensive player. I love mechanics like that. I love it when things don't die and I don't really know why. But I like it to be an absolute struggle from the start to the finish of the game.
And then there's the flip side where, in modern 40K, anything that's in the open will just instantly die.
Yeah. It's nowadays, if you're not behind line of sight.
Survives. Yeah.
I guess, people have always been complaining about that. But it was really bad in 9th edition. It's not so bad now, but if you're in the open, you're going to die. But it's easy to get covered, I suppose. I don't know. It's
a little different. There's like those mechanics in the game. It's nice because in one-page rules, like having the perspective of multiple editions, right? 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th edition of Warhammer. Going back to what like something the one-page rules has been able to do, which is you set up a table. It says set up about 15 pieces of terrain. You set up a bunch of terrain. You have your objectives, which the base core is you roll off and you put down a random number of objectives. You you take turns putting objectives down, then you roll to see who has who picks their deployment zone, right? So like you want to try and make sure the objectives are stacked, or you can gamble and go for like stacking them all in one area and trying to win that deployment roll off or whatever. And then you deploy and then you play and then you activate one unit at a time. And even things in the open, yes, they die, but they don't die as quickly because usually it's hard to kill a single thing in a single activation. Right? Like you have to have at least a couple of activations to sort of like focus on one unit to get it dead. And that allows your opponent to sort of react to that, right? Move them back and try and save them, or activate with them to sort of like make sure that you get something out of them before they completely die, or make sure they die so that you finish your activations first, then go first next turn because you're bringing your reserves in. There's a lot of cool concepts that go with it as well.
Yeah. The complexity's there. It's just the rules, as the name implies, have been pared down. So the emphasis is more on moving models, rolling dice, rather than trying to remember mountains and mountains of special rules and this overlapping with that and so on and so forth.
Nonsense.
And it still made some really cool immersive storytelling. Like, one of the things about being a war gamer is you want to sort of be on the table. Like your commander is like a paragon of yourself, right? Like it's just like an avatar of you running around the table and either zapping people with lightning or being super choppy in close combat, or barbarian yelling and kind of like you come at me bro sort of thing, right? And it felt very much like that. Like it was very straightforward, but the story was still happening. Like it didn't feel like chess where it was like very like, oh, I move a piece, you move a piece. It felt there was a a narrative getting created, and that's like the key to like a tabletop game. It's like, can it jump off the page at you, jump off the table, and like when you roll dice to like shoot something, can you picture it happening, right? And that's the thing that always got me into wargaming, is I could vividly picture the crew tearing my Terminators to shreds when they did, or I could vividly picture, like the Black Templar jumping out of a Land Raider Crusader with their chaplain and yelling like things to the Emperor and like smashing all their opponents. And with One Page Rules, very similar to that. I could imagine my giant lizardman on a giant Carnosaur lizard, like yelling at the other lizards to be more bloodthirsty. Like it was very immersive to me.
Absolutely. Okay. Fantastic. So because we're getting close to the end here, sadly as that's true, let me ask each of you one other question, not shifting gears here, but so since, as you said, a lot of you have played a lot of different games, and one thing I found since I started publishing Bat Reps and getting feedback from players is a lot of players have recommended games that I'd never heard of or I never would have tried unless so many people said to try it. And I tried it and I found it's fantastic. So for example, recently a whole bunch of my viewers said, you've got to play Space Weirdos. So I played Space Weirdos and it was a ton of fun. So I was going to ask each of you, with all the games, what's a game that you played that might be a little less well known, other than, something GW related, but that you had a lot of fun that you would recommend to anybody listening?
Oh, interesting. I don't even know if it's still supported or not. There's a few games I played that I thought were quite enjoyable.
I think.
Sorry,
go ahead, Luca. Go ahead.
No, I'm still thinking.
Well, I was going to say, like, to give it a little bit of context here, I'm a Games Workshop shill through and through, in the sense that
I grew up with them, right? Like I love it. I love all the original stuff. Yeah,
a lot of the games that we play were like Games Workshop games. The ones that I love are the Games Workshop games that aren't supported anymore, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? Like, I played War Machine Hordes back in the day before it died. I've played Star Wars Legion. I've played Star Wars Fleet or whatever.
Armada.
I know. Not Armada.
Game?
The basic X-wing. Yeah, just X-wing. I played like one or two games of X-wing. I've played a variety of games, but I am definitely conditioned to just love Games Workshop games. Plus, I have a lot of the models already. Yeah. So things like Epic or Battlefleet Gothic or things like that have just really resonated with me over the years. And the one game that I wish that I'd been playing longer was Blood Bowl, because I recently got into that game. And me personally, I honestly cannot believe that I've played tabletop games.
I'm surprised too. I can't believe you haven't played Blood Bowl.
5 years, and I have never played Blood Bowl. And I played 5 or 6 games. I played 6 games of Blood Bowl, and I am sad that I haven't been playing it for longer. So that style of game, of goofy, just you can't really control what happens. It's a simple game system, but with a lot of ramifications, right? That kind of game really appeals to me. And I know Josh wants to get me into Marvel Crisis Protocol, which it seems like another sort of like fun sort of style of game to play that has a lot of like tactical nuance to it. But I'd say Blood Bowl for me, and Battlefleet Gothic is a close second.
Okay. All right. Luca, you had some time to think. What would you recommend?
Oh, if I was to say specifically not Games Workshop games, I had a lot of fun playing Wild West Exodus. That was a fun game.
Exodus. I have never heard of that one.
I don't know if it's still supported. Great looking models. It's like what was that Daniel Craig movie? Cowboys and Aliens? Is that a movie? Something like that. It's like a bunch of like cowboys get their hands on alien tech set in like the probably like late 19th century still, and they are just whooping butt with like laser guns and like like these like chain guns, and like they'd still have like single action revolvers here and there and everything too, Winchesters and like all this stuff, and it was just it was awesome game though. I used a deck of cards to play, so it's kind of like Malifaux in that regard, which is another great game. Malifaux, I know, is very well supported. Malifaux is a fun little skirmish game too.
I never played Malifaux, but I had a lot of friends that did. And then I will say I've had a lot of fun learning Infinity. And I know it's like a more mainstream game, but Infinity has been another game that I've seen on the sidelines, but I've never jumped in, and it's been great to finally jump into it as well.
A game that just came to mind that I haven't played, but I'm very eager to play, and I'd like to in the future, is Silver Bayonet.
I have played that one. Played that one. So yeah, if you're skirmish level, it's a really cool idea, like Napoleonic warfare, but you bring in nightmares and monsters. It's like Mordheim meets history kind of thing.
Correct. That's exact. It's like you're a bunch of like soldiers or whatever, but you're dealing with like zombies and werewolves, and it's awesome. Yeah, it's a cool concept.
So I have tried that. I can recommend that one. That one's a lot of fun. Lot of fun.
It looked a lot of fun. I kind of skimmed through it a little bit, and like I said earlier, I'm like, oh, I see what they're trying to do here. Cool concept, cool idea, probably a really fun game. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, gentlemen,
there's so many really good games out there, and all in all, if you have any good recommendations, make sure you shoot them our way. We're always looking to try new things.
Space Weirdos. I played one game of that. Yeah, it's kind of like one-page rules. As the guy says in the rule set, he calls it a skirmish heartbreaker. He said, I made the game that I wanted to make, and it has a really intuitive way of adding buffs and debuffs, where instead of all dice being D6 or D10 or D20, the skill or the ability that your models have, if they're really bad with it, they roll a D4. If they're okay, they roll a D6. If they're really good, they roll a D8, a D10, a D12. And then as you get benefits or penalties to accuracy, cover, stuff like that, you move up and down what kind of dice you roll. And then your opponent does rolls based on their stats or whatever, and it's simply an opposed roll, whoever gets the higher number. But of course, if you're rolling a D12 and they're rolling a D4, most likely you're going to win, but it's not guaranteed. That's just one thing about it. I played it very intuitive. No matter what you're shooting, you're only ever rolling 2 dice. So you don't have to worry about, do I have enough searching through to find your crits and stuff like that. But I played it once and I was hooked. So
he made a sequel called Sword Weirdos.
Yeah, because everyone said it was so much fun. Can you do a fantasy one? And then awesome. I actually made this comment on the video. People are gonna be like, wait, that's not right. So I'll correct myself here. I had heard from another YouTuber I watched who was helping the guy develop it and play test it, that he's toying with a Western theme version as well.
Oh, nice. Okay.
So cowboy theme one. So all those are all great.
Apparently, like cowboys and all that stuff, going back, just like listen to a few interviews, that is what like wargaming was back in the 60s and 70s. Like cowboys, Wild West, almost like narrative kind of skirmish games, and that's kind of where a lot of modern war games all stem from that, allegedly.
Luka, have you played Gunfighter's Ball?
No, I have not.
That's another strictly Wild West. There's no laser guns or anything. It's 100% Wild West. The big draw for that one is when you shoot somebody and you hit them, there's actually a massive hit table on what body part you hit that can affect. Nice. So if you can hit them in the arm and they'll drop whatever weapons there. There are
Speaking my language.
Yep. You can everything.
The gritty. Luka loves the gritty.
Yeah.
Everything from you can shoot them from their feet, and they lose some movement to a headshot, which is an instant kill, and then of course, not to go into too many details, there are other body parts you can hit that have other kinds of penalties, shall we say.
Man, my perfect game, my dream game is it takes 10 minutes to resolve every die roll. Every little die roll takes 10 to 15 minutes to resolve. That's my dream game.
So you play BattleTech. I'm going to get a lot of hate for that one.
BattleTech is an outstanding game. Classic BattleTech is like a near perfect game, in my opinion. But I understand a lot of people don't like that kind of wargaming.
It has its goods and bads. It was just
for sure.
You roll to hit. You roll to see where do you hit. You roll. It's like I'm rolling 10 different sets of dice for one attack.
That's perfect. You love that.
Okay. All right. To each their own.
I don't know why, but
and then if you want a really simple game with a single dice, you play DBA. Okay, for all of you history nuts out there.
DBA?
I have my old DBA, De Bellis Antiquitate, I believe.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. Is that like ancients?
Ilis
So yeah,
Antiquitate, yeah.
you
The War of
you
Antiquities.
correct. You play with 12 stands, and you can play anything from ancient Carthaginians to like Gauls to Roman legion of different manipular or the cohort legions or whatever. It's the Polybian or the manipular legions, and then it goes all the way into like black powder stuff. But it's really fun,
Really?
and you play with like a single dice. Yeah, it's and you play on like a
Because
2x2 little section, and yeah.
I'll
And
have to check
it's
that out because the only ancient history, I mean, Hail Caesar covers that. Hail Caesar all the way up through
oh,
classical to black powder, and then there's my gosh, the name eludes me right now. Saga, the other
oh,
kind
Well,
of.
I've always wanted to play. Like, you never got around to it though.
But if you, I recommend DBA. DBA, funny enough, Corvus Belli makes a lot of DBA kits, but they're like 15 millimeter or 10 millimeter. Like they're small, and there's like a bunch of cavalry units to a stand, and you play with an army of 12 stands. And you play attacker defender because you're always having somebody invade your land, so you're either defending your land or attacking someone's land. And you have a little camp, and you can try destroy the enemy camp and use the terrain elements around you to to your benefit or to your enemy's detriment. And it is very, very fun. It's like Warhammer Fantasy, like regiment style, but like
Yep.
a 10 millimeter scale. And
I just-
you start with like a nice clean battle line, and then it all devolves into lots of little pockets. And then you just try and not get murdered by elephants or something. Yeah, it's really fun.
I mean, it was a common problem back then, so I can understand that. All right, so then I've got to try Wild West Exodus and DBA. Well, gentlemen, thank you very much for spending some time chatting with me about one-page rules, about gaming, about all that other stuff. I really appreciate it. To everybody else, make sure you check out the one-page rules bat reps and all the other bat reps that MinWargaming puts up. I imagine most folks are already pretty familiar with them, but if not, head on over there. In the meantime, keep your dice on the table, and we'll see you on the next one.